Will the Trump-Putin talks change anything, and how to put pressure on Russian dictator? These and other topics we will discuss right now. My name is Irina Uzlova, and today with us is Uriel Epshtein, the executive director of the American non-profit organization Renew Democracy Initiative. Uriel, hello, glad to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Of course, thanks for having me on.
Almost 2 hours, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin had their phone call, and I don't see any results and any sense of such phone calls. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know really, but what are your expectations from such calls between American president and Russian dictator?
No, I think it's unfair to say that there won't be any results. I think the results are very clear. You had the single largest drone bombardment of Kiev yesterday since the early days of the war, as far as I can tell. So the results are, I think, going to be fairly significant. I think they're already happening, which is to say that Russia will increase its barbarity. They will increase their attacks because they will realize that America is not going to push back. And without the United States as the key leader of the free world, I think the question as to whether Russia will remain isolated is a very much an open question. The results of this are, when Putin senses weakness in an opponent, in this case in the American president, he will take advantage of that weakness by any means necessary. And in this case, that actually means exacerbating this war, making this war worse, committing more atrocities and attacking more aggressively than he would dare to do before.
Yes, I agree. When Putin sees some weakness and some small steps, he makes the scale of his escalation bigger and bigger. And this is the results we can feel every night and even every morning in different regions of our Ukraine. But Uriel, J.D. Vance, Vice President of the United States, which had a new communication with our president in Vatican and said that everything was okay. But now he told us that, and for Sky News, that Donald Trump can say about economic benefits to warming relations between Russia and the rest of the world if Putin can stop his war. How can these relations, economic, political, be more warm between good countries and aggressive country like Russia? In what way?
Well, look, unfortunately, I think there's a long history between quote unquote good countries, as you noted, having warm quote unquote economic relations with countries that are not so good, right? I mean, just look at the economic relations between China and much of the rest of the world. So clearly, democratic nations have historically and unfortunately, I think are likely to continue to have these types of economic relations with countries that are exporting authoritarianism, right? That are exporting danger. In fact, when the Berlin Wall came down and when the Soviet Union fell, the prevailing economic philosophy around the world, the prevailing idea was that democracy would allow, rather that free trade would allow us to export democracy. Instead, what I think we're seeing is that this system of international trade is unfortunately leading us to import authoritarianism. So that's actually the unfortunate result, where you have companies that are afraid to speak out against the Chinese Communist Party, that are afraid to speak out in certain cases against Russia or against other dictatorships because they don't want to lose business. So I want to first just set up that stage, that this idea that there can be warming relations between dictatorships and free countries, unfortunately, is a very real one. It can absolutely happen. Now, number two, do I think it's likely? The answer is no. Because even before this war, we did not have a massive amount of trade with Russia. And so this idea that suddenly J.D. Vance and Trump are going to be able to significantly increase, by, let's say, hundreds of billions of dollars, the level of trade between free countries and Russia, I think that's unrealistic. And actually, it reminds me of a lot of these so-called trade deals that the Trump administration is trying to negotiate with countries around the world. The one that they most wanted to talk about in America was the trade deal between the US and the UK. and they were bragging about this, that this is an incredible trade deal, and that this is a perfect example of why tariffs are the right tool and why Trump's strategy is working. Here's the thing. The UK only had 1% tariffs on American goods. That's it. 1%. So in other words, this incredible trade deal that they're touting, at best, the only upside of that deal is going to be for our goods to be 1% cheaper in the UK, which is to say that the upside potential is almost nothing. It's almost zero. That essentially it's a nothing burger of a deal, but it is one nevertheless that the Trump administration has chosen to highlight and to brag about. And so, when I'm thinking about what it is that the Trump administration is likely to do with Russia, I think it will be very similar, where, God willing, this war will end, etc. I do not think it is likely to end anytime soon, because Putin has indicated that he is unwilling to end it anytime soon. But even if hypothetically it were to end tomorrow, I still do not think it is realistic for Russia to be reintegrated into the global system, because number one, Trump is not the only global actor. You do have leaders of other countries around the world, which I think are much less willing and less interested in doing business with Russia. And number two, because again, it's not so simple to suddenly convince companies to do business with a country that can at any point nationalize their goods, which is incidentally what Russia did in 2022. It nationalized billions of dollars worth of international companies, of international goods, etc. And that's something that I don't think companies are liable to forget.
But Russian dictator Putin last week told that he had a big line of companies who want to come back to Russian Federation, and he will organize like a contest for them and will choose among them. But it seems to me really that we have no such line of such companies, because they can live without Russia or make deals with Russia in private.
No. I mean, this reminds me of some of these old jokes that Ronald Reagan used to tell about the Soviet Union, right? And there's this great one about a farmer meeting with a commissar, and the farmer's talking about all the different crops, and the farmer, the commissar asks, well, how's the cabbage? The farmer's like, oh my God, the cabbage is amazing. It's amazing. It's more cabbage than you've ever seen. If you put it all together, it could feed half of Moscow. Commissar's, oh my God, that's incredible. Well, what about your carrots? How are your carrots? And the farmer says, oh my God, Commissar, the carrots are unbelievable. If you put all the carrots together, they could feed half of the Soviet Union. And so then the commissar says, oh my God, that's so amazing. Well, what about the beets? How about the beets? And the farmer says, Mr. Commissar, if you put all the beets together in one pile, they would reach the foot of God. Mr. Farmer, be careful. This is the Soviet Union. There is no God. Commissar, that's okay. There are no beets either. And so I think that this line of countries that are lining up to get back into Russia, it's similar to the story of this farmer and his cabbages and carrots and beets, which is to say the line is non-existent.
And in this case, it seems to me and to our politician experts that there is one of the biggest Trump's mistake, that he cannot realize that this war for Putin not about money, not about deals. This war is about his power. It's only one way he can save his power during this war against Ukraine, and about his real imperialistic ambitions. So Trump, which cannot realize these facts, cannot make pressure against Putin, and cannot make big roles and big play against him, or no?
I think that's exactly right. Look, I mean, unfortunately, Trump in this case is not unique. there is a long line of American politicians and diplomats, leaders of foreign policy who simply do not understand Russia. They don't understand the logic of the Kremlin. They don't understand the logic of Vladimir Putin. I remember when RDI's chairman, Garry Kasparov, published his book in 2015 that talked about the importance of defeating Putin and the enemies of the free world. He was laughed at in America. The New York Times put out a scathing review of the book, and yet now, 10 years later, almost every one of his predictions has come true. And I think that today, the leadership of American foreign policy would do well to listen to those of us. My parents are from the former Soviet Union as well. My mother from Kiev, my father from Moscow. They would do well to listen to those of us who have had to deal with Russian imperialism, Russian autocracy, and who understand the kind of man that Putin is. Because I remember back in 2008, after Putin invaded Georgia, right, and he essentially took apart south of Ossetia and Abkhazia, nevertheless, Obama rewarded him with a reset, which incidentally he mistranslated in Russian, but that's neither here nor there. But he rewarded Putin for these actions. And in fact, over the course of 20 years, Putin has been rewarded essentially every time he has chosen to escalate, beginning when he, with the fact that he bombed Grozny in Chechnya into the dust in 2000. He bombed, then in 2008, he invades Georgia. In 2014 is when the war in Ukraine actually begins, when he annexes Crimea. In 2015, he bombs Aleppo in Syria into the dust. In 2020, there's a massive protest in Belarus. Millions of people out on the street, or at least over 1 million people on the street, in a country of just 10 million or so. So you're talking roughly 10% of the population was protesting against the dictator. And most likely, Lukashenko, the Belarusian dictator, would have fallen if not for the fact that Putin went in with his army and shut down these protests. In 2021, he did the same thing, almost the same thing in Kazakhstan in order to protect the dictator there, Tokayev. And each time, the free world did not react. They did not respond. And so it's not shocking that in 2022, Putin would believe that he could now just take all of Ukraine without any kind of response from the free world. And it is by sheer luck, from the point of view of the free world, that you, the Ukrainians, had the power, the wherewithal, and the determination to stand up to Putin and ensure that the CIA's prediction that Ukraine would fall in 96 hours would be proven false. And so today, when I hear Trump talking again about Putin and making deals with Putin and so forth, not only do I hear someone who appears to have this innate sympathy to the Russian dictator, I also hear echoes, unfortunately, of American foreign policy that has been the case for, 10 to 15 to 20 years, sort of regardless of who has been the president. It's just, what makes Trump different is that he is more blatant. He's more aggressive. He's more clear in his willingness to believe Putin, to work with Putin. And he has indicated that he trusts Putin over his own intelligence services. The famous meeting in 2018 in Helsinki when Trump said that, Putin told me he did not meddle in American elections, and I believe him, or I take him at his word. This went against the united opinion of all 17 of American intelligence agencies. So Donald Trump believed a foreign dictator over his own intelligence services. And so I think what makes Trump different is simply that he is an order of magnitude worse with respect to his knowledge and understanding of Russia. But unfortunately, there is a precedent to trying to bring Putin into the fold and to believing that through business ties, we could try to open Russia up, when in reality, the only way to ensure or to at least make progress to try to get Russia back into the family of free nations is to ensure that Putin is defeated unequivocally and clearly. He must be defeated on the field field of battle, because only then might there be a chance that internally in Russia something might happen. But so long as Putin is perceived as being invincible, so long as Russia is perceived as continuing to advance militarily, then no such progress is possible, no matter what sort of business deals anyone offers the Russian dictator.
And Uriel, it seems to me that when Trump says that Russian tanks stuck in the mud, he realized that it isn't true, that Ukrainian forces stopped Russian tanks in 2022. But to make some pleasant things for Putin, Trump say about it. Or maybe he really cannot understand true facts about start of Russian-Ukrainian big war.
I think, unfortunately, tragically, it's the latter. Look, we saw the exchange between Trump and Zelensky in the Oval Office. We've seen Trump numerous times say that he believes that Zelensky started this war. It beggars belief. And truthfully, I've never spoken to Trump. I don't know the man. I don't know what he actually believes personally. But the simple fact that he's willing to say these things indicates either that he is really tragically misinformed or something worse. It's not up to me to speculate as to what that might be, but it's telling, I think, that Trump has attacked almost every world leader, literally almost every single world leader he has said something bad about, with the exception of Putin. Putin is the only world leader that he has never attacked. And I think the most he's said was, I think, a couple of weeks ago when Putin launched that massive ballistic missile strike on Ukrainian civilians. Trump put out on his Truth Social a statement that said, "Vladimir, stop!" exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, which, it reminds me, there's this American TV show called Veep, which is supposed to be this dark comedy about how everyone in government, how nobody in government knows what they're doing. And it's like right out of that TV show, for an American president's official response to the Russian dictator killing dozens of civilians in a neighboring country, for his response to just be, "No, Vladimir, stop. It's enough." Yeah. It's not a serious response from the most powerful country in the world. And the last thing I'll say is just the irony here is so thick for me that Donald Trump, a man who wants to be respected as a strong man, as the most powerful man in the world, and yet he makes himself look so small, so weak, so impotent with these small little outbursts in reaction to the horrific actions of, one of the most dangerous dictators on the planet.
And not only Trump looks like weak and not very smart in some moments person, but he makes the United States in general and it all with this renommee. Because he shows that super state cannot do anything with one dictator, and really only with this dictator, because against other dictators or states, Trump can do aggressive things.
No, that's exactly right. It's, the worst thing about this is that it's not just Trump who's being perceived as weak and impotent. It's the United States of America. And, again, if we want to go back a little bit to the Soviet Union, not even let's say up until 2008 or so, whether you like America or you hate America, you had to respect America, right? Our allies knew that they could trust us. Our enemies knew that they had to fear us. And today, our allies don't trust us, our enemies don't fear us, and therefore America is becoming a non-entity on the global stage. We are essentially becoming, or what Trump, I think, is trying to make us into some kind of corporation that happens to have an army. And nuclear weapons. But of course, in the grand scheme of things, that's not how you exert power on the world stage. And if, if people on your side don't trust you, they don't want to work with you. And if your enemies don't fear you, then they're going to do whatever they want and they're going to be more aggressive. And so it would not surprise me if other dictators start following suit. For example, again, I'm not making any predictions here necessarily, but I will say that I think that there is at least a 50% chance that China will be increasingly aggressive up to the point of a possible invasion of Taiwan within the next 3 years. Because Xi Jinping sees that Donald Trump is either unable or unwilling to unite free countries against dictatorships. So we are starting to enter an infinitely more dangerous world today than one that we were in even a year ago, even while this war was still going on. But people could nevertheless trust that America would be on the side of democracies and would stand against dictators.
So really, Uriel, if we talk about a more global picture, what are the main challenges and goals for democratic regimes against the backdrop of the unification of tyrannies? And I know that you have a common vision with famous world chess player Garry Kasparov. So what can we say about these challenges and how to solve these problems around such big wars, around such big dictators?
Irina, you're only asking the easy questions here. So first thing, thanks for noting. So Garry Kasparov and I are working together on a platform that we're calling The Next Move. So if you'd like, I would encourage anybody viewing this who would be interested in this type of analysis, especially from the United States, but with a bit of an international twist, to check out thenextmove.substack.com. You can also just Google The Next Move Kasparov or my name, Uriel Epshtein, and you'll find it online, and I hope you'll consider subscribing. But the important thing that we need to be able to do as the free world is, number one, we need to take care of our own business at home, right? That's something that is becoming increasingly clear. We just saw elections in Romania and in Poland. Thankfully, in Romania, the pro-democracy candidate won, and he won by a lot. He won by 8 percentage points, 54 to 46. And then in Poland, the pro-democracy candidate did win first place in the runoff, rather in the first round, but he will face a very difficult runoff. But the important thing for us to do now is to realize that we need to sell the idea of democracy, of a free and open liberal world order, to our own populations. Because right now, internally, there does not appear to be widespread agreement that free countries are better than dictatorships, that open societies are better than closed societies. And so we need to communicate to our own people that not only what we're fighting against, because that's been, I think, communicated a lot, but what we are fighting for, right? That we are fighting for a society where you have stability, where you can predict more or less what's going to happen tomorrow, and therefore you can feel secure in investing, if you're a company, in investing money into assets and building up your industrial base or building up your stockpile of goods, etc. And you can know that your supply chain isn't going to be disrupted a week from now. And if you're an individual, you need to know that your tax dollars are not going to be spent in corrupt ways. You need to understand that you are a part of something greater, and simultaneously feel that your own personal prosperity is tied up into this greater, broader experiment. And this message has been missing from the free world. I think that those of us who are kind of pro-democracy, those of us who believe that dictators must be defeated, we've taken for granted that idea, that notion that open societies are better than closed societies. And in fact, that was a mistake, right? Since the fall of the Soviet Union, we have failed to make a case for liberal democracy. We have said that democracy is good insofar as it offers economic prosperity, and that's it. That's the only thing that's good about democracy, is that it will offer people, a few extra dollars in the bank account. The problem with that is that in 2008, when there was a massive recession, right, and when people lost their savings, that deal, that promise, was broken. right? And so people lost faith in democracy. If the whole idea of democracy is that the only thing it's good for is to make you more money, and then you have an economic crash and you lose all your money, then who cares about democracy, right? Why support democratic processes and institutions if they aren't able to deliver on the things that they said they would deliver on? So what we need to do, number one, is to recognize that and to no longer be the people of the status quo. We need to be willing to admit to our mistakes. We need to be willing to say that we were wrong. For example, as an American, I'll say that Democrats, that our Democratic Party, has to admit that they were wrong to support Joe Biden and to say that Joe Biden could be the next president when clearly the man was unwell, that he was sick and he wasn't doing well, and he never should have run for a second term. He wasn't going to be able to serve out his second term. So number one, admit to those mistakes, and I think people will respect that. Number two, offer people something positive, a positive vision of the future to fight for. Don't just say that the other guy is worse. Talk about what it is that you want to achieve, what it is that your positive vision is. So you believe in an open society, you believe in a stable society, you believe in people being able to go about their business without having to worry about too much government intervention, et cetera, et cetera. So offer that positive vision. And then last but not least, number four, offer a positive strategy to achieve that vision. Be realistic. Right now I'm hearing and again, I'm talking from an American point of view, but I think it's important for people in Ukraine and elsewhere to understand what Americans right now are worried about and what Americans are thinking about. And so my other example is right now a lot of people are trying to nationalize local issues. So you have a candidate for New York mayor. Now, again, obviously nobody in Ukraine needs to care about who the mayor is in New York, but the logic, the philosophy, I think is an important thing to understand. You have somebody running for mayor in New York who has made a key part of their campaign an argument around Israel, right? There are all these slogans about how bad Israel is and all of this. And yet, what power does the New York mayor have with respect to Israeli-Palestinian issues? None. He has no power as it relates to Israel. So why is that a part of the campaign? Right? Talk about things that actually matter to the people that you're representing. And so that's another thing that I think we in the West and we in the free world, on a local level, we have to be able to do. We have to recognize that we need to focus on those things that will actually give people what they need and what they're expecting. And so last but not least, because I know that this is a very long answer to your question, we need to recognize that dictators are all united. And they're working together. And that's something that I still think the West has not done. I think Europe right now, for example, is looking for ways to work more closely with China, recognizing that America might not be reliable. But that's not the answer either. Europe right now needs to stand on its own 2 feet. It needs to recognize that the European Union must take on the mantle of global leadership. And in other words, they then have to reject Putin, Xi Jinping, and other dictators and recognize that they are the ones who are going to have to pay the price for defending freedom, which means that they're going to have to invest in their militaries. They're going to have to invest in defense, and they're going to have to fully support Ukraine in a way that they still haven't been able to do, right? The new German Chancellor Merz promised Ukraine Taurus missiles within 1 week of becoming chancellor. Where are those Taurus missiles? So that's the last point, is that the free world needs to demonstrate that it has the political will to defend itself. I think that the voters in Romania demonstrated that they have that will. And so my question is, does the rest of Europe, do the people of the United States and of other countries, do we have that will to unite and to stand up to those who would destroy sort of the free and open global society that we've been trying to build since the end of World War II?
Talking about United Allies, Scott Bessent, U.S. Treasury Secretary, mentioned about the sanctions against dictator about oil and talk that the United States want to make it together with Europe. But can we assess that Europe and United States can be still together like United Allies, or they become more independent now in such role?
Well, I mean, look, I think that the Trump administration has done a lot to alienate our allies in Europe. And so I don't think it's, I just mentioned that I would want Europe to be willing to stand up to China, but Europe is not going to be willing to stand up to China if they feel like they don't have the support of the most powerful country in the world, and so Bessent and others can talk about the importance of trying to work with Europe on oil or any number of other things, but so long as President Trump continues to attack European leaders and JD Vance, Vice President Vance, continues to attack European nations, I think it's unlikely that Europe is going to be particularly willing to work with us on any number of issues, because they know that a single tweet from Donald Trump, a single statement from the American president could change everything. And when you can't rely upon the word of an ally, it's reasonable that you are not going to trust or work with that ally over time.
Uriel, thank you very much. Thank you for this conversation. Very deep and good. See you next week. I hope so. Take care.
All right. Thank you so much for having me on.
We will win. We have no another ways and paths to fair, I think, and really confident peace. Thank you. Bye.
That's right. Absolutely.
And thank you for your support in every hour interview and all language we have our conversation. Uriel Epshtein was with me, the executive director of the American non-profit organization Renew Democracy Initiative, and my name is Irina Uzlova. Thank you guys for joining us for our YouTube channel, War and Politics 24. Subscribe, please. We have more than 100,000 viewers and subscribers, and thanks to everyone for your active position and for your time. See you next week. Take care.